Anna is here, so we're ready to go. If you'd like to begin.
All right. Welcome to the March 4th, 2022 Telehealth Committee meeting. My name is Chris Jones. I'm the chairperson of the committee. Before we convene, I would like to remind everyone present that the board is a consumer protection agency charged with administering and enforcing the board laws. When protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. The meeting today is being conducted consistent with the provisions of Government Code Section 11133. I will announce when we are accepting public comment on the various issues, and the meeting moderator will open the lines as appropriate. Each commentator will have 2 minutes to comment. Moderator, would you please provide the audience instructions on how they may participate during the meeting at the appropriate times?
This is the moderator, and when we get to a point in the agenda in which the committee calls for public comment, the Q&A panel will be open for members of the public to indicate that they would like to make a public request. Additionally, we will also be accepting requests from members who are using the raise hand feature. If you are an audio only participant, you can use the raise hand feature by pressing *3 on your device, and then you'll click *3 again to lower your hand. Once you've been called on and you'll be asked to unmute your microphone. If you are on the WebEx application, you'll get a prompt on your device that says unmute me, and you'll need to click that to unmute yourself. If you are audio only, you'll be clicking *6 on your device to unmute yourself when prompted. You'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning, and at that point, your microphone will be muted, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. I believe that is all the instructions I have.
All right, thank you. Now I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask Christina to call roll to establish quorum.
Good morning. Chris Jones.
Here.
Diana Herwick.
Here.
And for the record, Susan Friedman is absent. We have a quorum.
And I'd like to give the opportunity of the board members to introduce themselves. Diana, would you like to start?
Yep. Hi, I'm Diana Herwick, LPC member.
And I'm Chris Jones, chairperson and LEP member. All right, so thank you. Before we begin, I'd like to remind all speakers to remain on topic when making comments to the agenda items. The first agenda item is discussion and possible approval of the September 9th, 2021 and October 1st, 2021 committee meeting minutes, which is agenda item number 3. I know it's just you and me, Diana. Go.
I will move to approve the minutes.
All right, and I'll second. Do we have any comments from the board or the board?
This is Sabina. Can I interject and ask that we amend that motion to include the dates of the meeting so that we know that they're both included in this one motion, and then we can go to public comment for the motion.
Yep. Okay. I move to approve the minutes from October 1st, 2021 and January 28th, 2022.
Thank you. And then if Chris, assuming he'll second.
I will second, yes.
Thank you. And then we can have public comment on this particular motion.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click that icon of a question mark within a square located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. And then call-in only participants can indicate that they would like to make a public comment by pressing *3 on their device. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, moderator, thank you.
Okay, I'll take the roll call vote.
Thanks.
Diana Herwick.
Yes.
Chris Jones.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. So the next agenda item is the overview of the committee's roles and tasks, agenda item number 4. Roseanne, would you like to provide us with an overview?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So this is just basically an overview of the telehealth committee, which started over a year ago now in January 2021. It's kind of where we've been and where we're going. We've covered a lot of ground, but we still have quite a few topics to go through in the future. It's a big emerging topic. So you can see a list kind of that's our to-do list and some regulations that we've been working on. That's really all I have to say. This is mostly just an update.
Let me try that again. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Good. Okay. Any comments from those in the audience?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click that Q&A icon, look at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or if you are call-in only, press *3 on your device to raise your hand. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to indicate that they would like to make a public comment. All right, seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you. All right. So then the next item on our agenda is the discussion regarding telehealth best practice guidelines, our guidance document that we discussed at our last meeting. Steve, do you want to provide us an overview of kind of where we are with that?
Yeah, definitely. So during the last committee meeting, we had a discussion on concerning the allowable telehealth locations of pre-licensees, and it brought up a lot of discussion. And I know with what has recently happened with the pandemic and the increase in use of telehealth, there's a lot of questions surrounding, not only just the proper allowable locations and sites of pre-licensee people, but also how our licensees need to conduct their best way to conduct themselves to make sure they're not violating any of the BBS laws, while also, maintaining good consumer protection. And I also I look at that as quality, mental health care through telehealth. And so our idea was, since there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of work we still have ahead of us, it might be good to at least start out with a best practice document. Since our last meeting, what I have been doing is looking at literature from various national and state organizations, the National Board of Clinical Counselors, the California Associations of Marriage and Family Therapists, National Association of Social Workers, the Association of Social Work Boards, and the American Association of State Counseling Boards, to kind of get an idea of kind of the main topics that we should be discussing in a best practice document, some of the areas that we should hit on. The other thing that I will be reviewing too is in 2010, the board had actually done a report on video supervision. So I will be bringing that into possibly using some of that in this best practice document. So after looking at all the different various, guidelines that are out there, that are literature that has been put out there as in best practices for telehealth, I've come up with some of the areas that we really, I think, should be hitting on in this best practice document. As you see, this is the list. So we want to assess how a supervisor or employer can assess whether a setting is appropriate for a pre-licensee, helping them to key points in assessing whether a pre-licensee's employment status is appropriate, assessing whether telehealth is appropriate for pre-licensees, including which modes of telehealth are appropriate. And this, I kind of want to make sure this best practice document is going to be general. So we're not although we might mention things like Facebook or texting, it's just kind of when we bring this to the board, we'll have a further discussion on what we want to do to further define, or if we need to define things in law, especially around that area. The other thing we're looking at is assessing whether telesupervision is appropriate for a pre-licensee. That's another big concern. So additionally, there's a lot of information out there about what would be good to have in a consent form regarding telehealth. You know, one of the things that I was noticing that was you want to make sure you have in there a notice to the client actually that the benefits or the pros and cons of telehealth is one of the things that I think we'll probably be addressing and putting in there. What steps can the the employer's supervisor and pre-licensee, what steps they can take to make sure that their mode of how they're performing telehealth, the technology they're using is secure and confidential. And then the other part about it is there's a concern, and this is going to be an interesting one to put in here. We'll try to figure out how to write it, but how does that work with, you know, an employer or supervisor and the registrant? Who pays for what? What are the obligations of the actual supervisee or pre-licensure? When do you determine when somebody is a independent contractor? How do we look at that? How do we determine that? So these are the broad topics that we will be discussing in this document. Unfortunately, I did put in the recommendation here to have an open discussion and then have the board direct. But since I really didn't make this an actionable item, there's one other point that I had put in there is what we might do now is, or what I want to do at this point is to see if there's any other, specific topics that people want to put in here, the board wants to, or if stakeholders have some idea. And then additionally, once I get that, we will proceed on kind of drafting that, which might even include working with a subject matter expert to, possibly vet the draft we have before we bring it back to the committee. So we have something that's really, solid. So at this point, I think I would like to open it up to see if anybody has any other suggestions on topics that we would like to put in this best practice document.
Hi, Diana.
So not a question, not an addition, but maybe a question. You had mentioned the video supervision report, and I don't know if you said 2008 it was done or 2018. What was the year that
It was 2010.
Oh, 2010.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like how current that, that's 12 years ago, and so much has changed in the way of telehealth and telesupervision that I'm just wondering how outdated that information is. Just something to consider, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something I've considered, and in looking at the literature that's out there, you will not, a lot of it is outdated already, but there are, kind of balancing that with the current data. The best practice document should be it's going to be a kind of a broad general. So some of that information will help. It pinpoints some of the areas that we really should be concerned about. The implementation, I guess, kind of the specifics. Yes, in 2010, wasn't Facebook, Instagram, whatever, wasn't a big topic. Texting actually might not have been a great big topic either. So I definitely will take that in consideration.
I like the direction, excuse me, this is going, Steve. I think keeping it with broad strokes is a good idea, so we don't get pigeonholed into things. But also, what I foresee happening is as this I kind of look at this document as almost like a living, breathing thing, and as we start to put it together, I'm almost positive that more things will surface that we need to address, because that has been the theme of this committee. We turn over a rock and many things crawl out. I'm very happy with with these starting points, and I think we're in a good position.
And just to and I think this could be, yeah, it could help us carry on the discussion more pointedly. I don't know. And then also just want to reiterate out there, what we're going to put in here are considerations. It's just considerations. It's going to be real basic. You might want to think about this. It's not going to say, I mean, some of these we could get specific on some of the laws, like independent contractor, how's that viewed? But mostly it's just going to be considerations.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I think the resounding thoughts and feelings from the last committee meeting is that people are really looking for direction, and as this is an evolving format for providing mental health support to our consumers, I think it's great that that we're all looking at this as one big group, and really trying to kind of give guidance to our providers on how we can move forward. So I think it's great.
I
All
guess
right.
I'm sorry, a couple of
No.
other thoughts that I have are just, I'm looking through this document and we just say pre-licensee. We don't differentiate between a trainee and a post-degree pre-licensee. And so I guess I just want to make sure that we're clear that this document pertains to all of them, whether they're a brand new student or they've got, 2,700 of their hours done. And then the other thing, and I'm not sure if this is the place, but I know we've thrown around over the last couple of years whether or not there should be a maximum number of hours allowed through this. If this is a best practice, if we say, an intern, an associate needs 3,000 total hours, can they do all of their hours via telehealth? And I'm not sure where that's going to be clarified.
And I think on the last part, definitely with pre-licensees, we'll make sure that everyone understands what that term is, and it is what we're including in the trainees. As in the amount of hours, that is definitely it's going to be a whole separate subject. That'll be another discussion point. I'm assuming in a future agenda item. So, but this might help us to kind of start working on looking at that.
And I think that we started to broach that subject a few meetings ago prior to you coming on to the committee, but it's definitely something that has been, when I look at the issues that we are trying to tackle, I recall that being one of them. I think it might be a little bit further down the to-do list though at this point. Yeah, but it's important. Thank you. Okay, are there any, can you open the chat up for the comments from the public?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. All right, it looks like we do have one individual who's requested public comment, Ben Caldwell. I'll request to unmute your mic. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears. All right, and you are unmuted. You'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Ben Caldwell. I'm a licensed MFT, and just three things quickly related to this. The first, I know, Steve, you had said you were gathering best practices documents from a whole bunch of different organizations. I don't know how current their particular document is, but I know that at least if you go back a few years ago, there was a best practices document from the American Telemedicine Association related to video-based mental health care, and so that might be another one worth looking into as well. Question, and there's no sort of desired specific answer here, but it's worth considering, who is this best practices document for? And I think some of the discussion already has kind of reflected that. I know that to some degree this came out of discussion related to supervision of pre-licensees doing telehealth, but it's a different scope in terms of the document if we're talking about a best practices document for supervisors who are supervising people doing telehealth versus supervisees doing telehealth versus if we're talking about any licensee, registrant, or trainee or intern doing telehealth. So I think it would be helpful for the committee to provide clear direction on what the intended audience here is. And then the last thing is just a sort of point of clarification. I know that in regulations, it's 1815.5 D3 requires the use of industry best practices for telehealth. And so I wonder if it's the intent of the board to further specify what is meant there in regulation, or whether these are
15
instead
seconds.
just broader points for consideration. Thank you very much.
All right, this is the moderator, and it appears that was our only request for, oh, I apologize. We do have another request for public comment. Jennifer Alley, give me one moment while I find you in the attendee list. Oh, request to unmute your microphone. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device, and you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. All right, and you are unmuted.
With CAMP, the California Association for Marriage and Family Therapists. I appreciate the opportunity to comment and the thoughtfulness behind the document that's been, presented to us. But I did hear what Mr. Caldwell was saying about clarifying if it's for supervisees or pre-licensees, and wonder if maybe there might be two separate documents, because what a pre-licensee needs to be sure of in terms of employee protections is a little bit different than how a supervisor would be assessing a home environment, if that is where telehealth was originating for. I do have a couple questions under the various bullets. It might be more productive to send those to the board directly, but just kind of more, questions and thoughtfulness about ensuring that the pre-licensees are protected, so that they're not only trained properly when they're acquiring their clinical hours, but if there's an oversight or lack of clarity for what their supervisor determined, and possibly what the board determines moving on, what actually will happen to their clinical hours. And just like, so what really should a supervisor be looking for in the home, or when they're making the assessment, and just make sure that everything's extremely clear. Well, I realize this is a best practice document and not regulation or state statute. I think it just needs to be really clear of the guidance and expectations of the board. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you, moderator. And thank you to our, to Mr. Caldwell and Ms. Alley for their thoughtful comments. We appreciate that. Okay, so next agenda item is, sorry, I'm on the wrong spot. There we go. Next agenda item is possible recommendation, discussion and possible recommendation regarding the telehealth clarifications in statute and regulations, California Code of Regulation, Title 16, 1815.5, Business Professions Code 4980.36 and 499.33. Do we need a motion now, or do we need discussion first?
Discussion first.
We should
Yeah,
do
let's-
discussion first.
Yeah, I thought so. All right, so let's have some discussion. Roseanne, I believe this is your part, right?
Yes, thanks, Chris. So at the last telehealth committee meeting, a couple of potential clarification, need for a couple of clarifications came up, one in statute and one regulation. I'm going to discuss them both together because they may be there's a possibility they might be interrelated. And so I'll discuss both items, and we can have a discussion at the end on how to proceed. So first, I'm going to tackle the item that's in statute. There is a possible clarification that could be made. Right now, our practicum requirements for LMFT students and professional clinical counselor students refers to the practicum requirements. There's a certain number of hours for each that needs to be gained, and is referred to as that it must be face-to-face. And obviously, with the wider and wider spread use of telehealth, there has become some confusion on what exactly face-to-face means. So the board is in the process, on one hand, of pursuing legislation to clarify that trainees can provide services via telehealth. So that is going to be clarified that it is allowed. So that decision has already been made and is moving forward. So now that that's been decided, is it appropriate at this time to clarify what face-to-face practicum means? Does that mean via video conferencing and in person? Does it mean in person only? Does it mean any kind of telehealth, which could include things like texting and other things? So the wording there is very important. Also, at the last meeting, when we were discussing that face-to-face practicum requirement, stakeholders suggested that the committee also include in this discussion whether practicum might be the appropriate place to require at least some in-person counseling experience hours. So that comes into the discussion as well. And so in attachment A, I highlighted where in the law that face-to-face wording comes up. And then I did a little bit of research about how the accreditation agencies for the professions are handling this now. So I looked up the accreditation standards for KCREP, which the official document, unfortunately, right now is from 2016. They are working on a 2023 update. They indicate that on their website. But for KCREP, in the old 2016 document that's currently in place, the practicum requirement is discussed. In-person video conferencing does not appear to be addressed, although a definition of direct service is provided I gave the page number on the link. KCREP does on its website note that it's in the process of working on an update to the standards. They have kind of a draft, but it doesn't really appear to go into a lot of more specifics about telehealth or video conferencing. But I don't know if that draft is just what it says. It's a draft, so I don't know where they are in their process. So that's KCREP, which is the LPCC accredited agency. I looked up the Council on Social Work Education accrediting agency, which we require for all of our social work applicants, must have a school accredited by that. And social work law, the reason that's not in play here is social work law, we don't even spell out practicum requirements because all degrees have to be accredited by CSWE. And so it's totally up to them what they want to require. In their document, they refer to practicum as field education. They require 900 hours of it. It specifies in the actual document, which is from 2015, that it's in-person contact, but it doesn't clarify that any further. However, they did release a FAQ document during the pandemic. It was dated December 2021, and they do address the allowability of meeting field experience via telehealth. They say that it includes digital technologies. So they provide a little bit of elaboration there. So that's just the CSWE for social workers. And then if you don't see it included in here, I had a little trouble finding it, but COAMPS, which is the MFT accreditation standards, they do have a brand new document. It became effective January 1, 2022. On page 25 of that document, they discuss their practicum, the 300 direct clinical contact hours for students. And the document states that if it includes teletherapy, that they must have policies and procedures in place to support teletherapy practice by supervisors, including attention to applicable legal and ethical requirements and current emerging professional guidelines. So they don't, in the most current document, they don't provide a specific requirement of number of telehealth hours. It just says that if you're using telehealth, you need to have certain procedures in place to do that. So it kind of seems like to me that everybody's sort of in the same boat, is trying to figure this out moving forward and how to allow telehealth. AMFTRB has a state-to-state practicum comparison on their website, but it doesn't go into the level of detail of telehealth versus in person. Looking at a few other states' laws, nobody seems to really be breaking that down at this time. And so that's kind of where we are at with that. So that's the item number 1 for discussion. Item number 2, I'm gonna talk about this because it could be interrelated. In our regulations, section 1815.5, that also talks about that's basically our telehealth regulations that specifies who can do services via telehealth. Our telehealth regulations set the board standards of practice for telehealth. And it specifically states that a valid and current board license and registration is needed to provide services to clients in California via telehealth. It also specifically refers to licensees and registrants only. So trainees and social work interns are not mentioned at all in this document. The board does not officially have jurisdiction over trainees and interns yet, although that's a little bit different for MFT trainees because they're allowed to count per degree hours. So there's a little more authority there, but still not full jurisdiction. So it might be appropriate to exclude trainees and interns from this section since they're not under our jurisdiction yet. They are allowed to provide services via telehealth, and they have an exemption from licensure in our definition of non-exempt settings, where it says specifically that a trainee or an intern can do perform services. So I would think that the statute overrides regulation here. The real question is, do we want to include the trainees and interns in section 1815.5? Attachment B shows the potential amendments that what it could look like if we included them. However, I don't know that including that does pose some problems because, for example, they don't have a license or registration number to provide yet. So it may be better, since they're not under our jurisdiction, to just suggest that the supervisor require them to follow the telehealth regulations. So anyways, that is the discussion with that piece, and I will open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Roseanne. Diana?
Sorry, I was just writing down my thoughts so I don't forget when I start talking, but just a couple of things that I'm thinking about. I know one of the issues was, do we limit the number of telehealth hours? And I think in our last meeting, and maybe it was the October meeting also, there was some talk about, if we limit it, then we're limiting accessibility to the clinicians or the interns that, need to do things via telehealth because they can't get into the office. So I'm really torn on that because there's a piece of me that says, oh my gosh, yes, they're therapists. They need to be face-to-face in person with clients. And then I wonder if they really do, because I don't know what's going to happen 15 years from now. 20 years from now, I didn't see this. 20 years ago, I didn't imagine us doing everything we've done the last 2 years. So maybe it doesn't need to be limited. And if we do limit it, then we need to take into consideration the people who can't get into the office. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that kind of goes along with this, and I know, Roseanne, you mentioned the possibility of, maybe we don't even worry about the social work interns and the trainees in education programs. But I know a big topic that I keep hearing come out, especially over the last 2 years, is we have a lot of online universities that are training our clinicians, whether they're PC, MFT, or social work. And we've got schools that are within California that have students out of California. But in school in California, they might have a clinic that's providing telehealth. And they would like to be able to use their students who maybe, let's say, live in, I don't know, Missouri, and that student wants to work at the university's counseling center, but can't because they are a student that's in Missouri, not in California. Or the other way around, that it's an out-of-state school that has a student that's in California, but the student would like to provide services out of state at an agency. So these are all just things that come up when we look at the trainees and the education of trainees and how to get them their hours and the issue of telehealth. So I just kind of want to throw that out. And I don't know, Chris, if you have thoughts on that. I know it's only you and I on the committee, but I think it's worth looking at and just kind of considering those things as we move forward.
Thank you, Diane. I think that that's, those are really important, topics to kind of discuss. Um, with regards to, again, it's such a big, broad topic, looking at the face-to-face component of it, I'm kind of in the same boat that I do believe that there's benefit to the face-to-face piece of it. I think that through the big survey that we've done, a lot of the training programs and a lot of licensed professionals that we have are saying that supervision can be effective. Through through video conferencing, as well as therapy. So it doesn't necessarily have to, we don't necessarily have to put a limit on it. We've heard a lot of arguments, to your point of accessibility. If we do limit those hours, then we need to take that into consideration. And you're right, 20 years ago, I was in the same boat. I would never have thought that we were, that we would be, looking at this issue. So, I think it's important to kind of keep an open mind and as we look forward. I do think that there should be some clarification at some point about what face-to-face is and, what it entails. The therapist-y person in me, gets less comfortable when we start using things like text messaging and email, versus, being able to see somebody and kind of lay eyes on body language and things like that. And I think that when you put someone in a room with you, that we reduce barriers, between both client and supervisee. I do still believe that there's value to that, but also that, we need to move forward and look at things from a different light. With regards to the trainees, I struggle with in my psychologist brain, I want to have a more clear line about, where we are with the training programs, out of state training programs, training, students who are in California versus, in-state programs that are allowing out-of-state opportunities. I think that that's a can of worms, and I'm not really sure how to do that without putting some sort of line in the sand that we need to be really mindful of as we're looking at at how we're training people. I was talking with Rosanna a little bit yesterday. I am of the opinion, I think that we would maybe want to recommend to the training programs that they have their trainees kind of follow our current guidelines, because that's the law they're going to be walking into when they're when they get licensed. So we want to kind of train them. I think it makes sense to kind of train them for what's coming up versus giving them a different set of rules today and then having them have to switch and learn something new when they get their license. I know that we can't blanket anything. Everyone's got a little bit different approach to it. But I just think there's so many details to consider when we're really looking at these changes. So I would love to say I have some definitive answers and responses, but I think I have more questions. And I really, and this is where I really truly appreciate the feedback that we get from the public about people that have boots on the ground and and are seeing this on a regular basis. I know personally, when I have interns, they're face to face, and although we are conducting telehealth practices, that I know that my intern is in the next office over, or if we're doing telehealth, if we're doing supervision, I know that via telehealth, that I know that in a couple of days he's going to be in the office with me. So it's a good mix. I haven't had the experience of completely doing like a telehealth supervision with an intern. I've had the opportunity to have a nice mix. So I do appreciate the experience that we get from our public and the people that are doing that on a daily basis.
I guess the first time I was asked to teach an online class in a counseling program, I think I kind of took it because I wanted to prove that it couldn't be done, because I thought it was ridiculous that we were training clinicians online. And then I realized that it really works. And I bought into that. And I think that's kind of the same idea with using video to do therapy. I would have never imagined when I was a student that this was possible, that you could build rapport, that you can, reflect on even body language and immediacy and all of these skills that we're teaching our counselors. But they're showing me week after week that it's totally possible. It is doable. And I guess, while I do still say that ideally everybody would be face-to-face in person in the same room, that's the ideal for me. That's kind of my own bias, I guess, because if you ask my teenage children, they would say they'd much rather text message with a counselor than ever sit in an office with a counselor. And they're not going to go to therapy if they have to go and sit in an office. So there's some really important reasons to keep, telehealth. I do think it's really important that they at least do have some face-to-face contact, even if it's video. That text messaging, if we said, text messaging is included in telehealth, and our trainees and associates can have an indefinite number of hours done that way, that would worry me. So I think that has to be kind of maybe pulled back a little bit, at least now. Maybe 20 years from now, I change my mind on that. But it does seem like this. I mean, we are having a meeting right now and it's effective. And, you and I are talking face to face over a camera. And so I guess I would like to see us move forward with that, but clarify where that text messaging fits in with that. So, I guess really, if I look at the accessibility and the fact that this works, I don't know that I really want us to limit that. And I'll stop talking. Go ahead, Roseanne.
I based on what I'm hearing, I wonder if it would be appropriate to propose something like in where the face-to-face is mentioned in the practicum requirements. If it would be appropriate to clarify that it meant in person or video conferencing. I wonder what the thoughts are on that, because for the trainees that are first learning, and then possibly we could also add some language in that said something like it is or it is encouraged or recommended that supervisors follow the board's telehealth regulations as specified in 1815.5, acknowledging that it might not be appropriate to write them in because we don't have necessarily jurisdiction over them, but that would be the best practice. I could draft some language that looks something like that and bring it back to the next meeting. So that's kind of my thought from what I'm hearing. Interested to hear what everybody thinks about that.
And I just wrote down one more thing so I don't forget it, but yes. And what happens then if there's technology problems or the client who says, I prefer to not be on camera? As an instructor and as a supervisor, I tell my trainees and my students that they have to be on camera. There's no, oh, sorry, my technology doesn't work tonight, or, oh, my husband's at home and I don't want to turn on the camera. That gets rid of the face-to-face, right? If we're just talking by phone, that face-to-face piece isn't there. So that's not allowed. It truly has to be on camera, you and I looking at each other. And so I think that has to be very clear in
right.
The
yeah, video conferencing would mean just that, and it would be just trainees. I mean, it's basically acknowledging that for trainees who are just learning, it has to be video. I mean, otherwise we have to go into it has to be X amount of hours for this and X amount of hours. So it just gets really complicated. And I think that it really has to be, if you want the hour to count, it's got to be this or this.
I don't mean to throw a monkey wrench in, but and this is coming from my own personal experience, so I don't have data to support my theory that I'm going to throw out. But I in the world that we're living in, and in my own experience, having the face-to-face time with my supervisee is paramount in order for for their education. But I've also done phone supervision, but that was after there was an established relationship. So, like, and I get that your point, Diana, about it's much better, camera off isn't always the best thing. But I wonder if there needs to be some leeway in once, and I don't know that that means adding, a number of hours of face to face within the supervision. But I wonder if there needs to be some leeway in once the supervisor feels that the relationship has been established, that there's room to do like like phone supervision if necessary. What do you think?
So you're talking about phone supervision, and I guess that's a little bit different if you were supervising me versus you're doing therapy with me. So are you clarifying that maybe phone supervision is okay, but what about phone therapy? So if I'm a trainee and my client just prefers not to be on camera with me, do I get to keep doing therapy with her? I kind of look at it
Okay.
as, oh, your tire is flat and you weren't able to make it to the office. We reschedule our appointment. If technology isn't up and running today and you can't be on camera, then we'll go ahead and reschedule our appointment.
Sorry, I thought we were talking about
Oh.
that. Still talking about supervision. I must have missed a step in there. No, I agree. I think especially for a trainee, I would think that face to face, therapy sessions would be important. Yeah, I agree. I would thought we were back on the supervision piece of it. So okay. Anything else, Roseanne, that we're missing before we open up to
That's it.
public
I'd
comment?
be curious to see what the public
Yeah.
feels about what got tossed around here.
I have a feeling that we're going to have lots of comments from our public about this
Me too.
topic. So, moderator, if you'd like to open the discussion for public comment, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. All right, it looks like we have a couple comments and a couple raised hands. I'm going to go in the order of comments received, so please don't, if we haven't gotten to you yet, please don't type again. And then you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. All right, so we'll start off with Michelle Crawford Morrison. I will request to unmute your microphone now. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device. All right, you are unmuted.
Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, so sorry. There seems to be some. You can hear me now? Yeah, okay. So sorry. There seemed to be a little delay. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak on this topic. I think it's really important. And Chris, I just wanted to tell you that I do a lot of supervision, and I do it since COVID. I do it all in telehealth, and I also do telehealth therapy sessions myself. I work for a university, and we have a counseling center. We have students in California who are providing services to clients in California all over the state. It's been really successful. So here's one of the things that I noticed. One of the assumptions has been, and there actually is studies and literature on the efficacy of doing telehealth. One of the concerns were if you had education in person and training in person, do you need some sort of training to provide telehealth? And I think that's been kind of an assumption that, yeah, there needs to be some guidelines and maybe some education on how to do that shift from in-person to telehealth. One of the things that seems to be missing, and I'm actually done a lot of research on this too, is that there's not a lot in the literature about the reverse. So if you have individuals who have done their education and their training all in telehealth, the question now is, do they need to have additional training to go and see clients in person? And there's a lot of gaps in the literature on that. So to me, it feels like before we can even kind of make that decision, which I think is what you're trying to do, there's not a lot of research out there to support it. I'm actually thinking of doing this for a doctoral
15
project.
seconds.
And I think we need to go and talk to the trainees and find out how successful they've been going from telehealth to in-person. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. That was insightful. I hadn't really thought about the reverse angle before, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, this is a moderator. We'll move on to our next individual as requested public comment. Jennifer Alley, please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Good morning, Jennifer Alley again with CAMP. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this item. And I just would, echo the comments made by Ms. Crawford that it does kind of, pose the reverse question. If there's no in-person training requirements, is it necessary, since we've, now moving forward with board legislation to require telehealth training and telehealth. So it does seem to be a balance. CAMP has continually stated that we think, we want the future workforce to be well-rounded, which would be able to provide both in-person and telehealth training successfully. And so I do, right now, our understanding is the only requirement in statute is the 150 face-to-face. And so if that is changed to be video, then there is no requirement for in-person training moving forward, and that causes some pause. And then additionally, if a trainee is going to be utilizing telehealth services, I do have the question of, is there any rubric around where that will be originating? And again, would a telehealth trainee, currently in school be doing that from their home? And if so, wouldn't that be more like a private practice? And where would the supervisor be? Because they wouldn't be immediately available. And so I think additional clarification if trainees would be utilizing telehealth is required here. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Ben Caldwell, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Good morning, thank you. Ben Caldwell, licensed MFT. As it relates to the specific question at hand about kind of how to handle the face-to-face wording, I think that the board does have good precedent in what's already in legislation around supervision, where the language is, and forgive me because I might not be quoting this exactly correctly, but it's something like real-time two-way video conferencing. And that seems like that would be a good, effective set of language to use here that also addresses Mr. Jones's concern as it relates to, texting and that kind of thing. And there are certainly related issues here. I land in a different place from Ms. Alley when it relates to whether it should be okay for people to get all their practicum experience through telehealth. But if the sentiment of the board is that they want at least some of that experience to be in person, then I would just suggest that instead of inserting an arbitrary number in terms of how many hours, to simply allow in statute or regulation that the practicum can be a combination of in-person or telehealth experience. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual's requested public comment. Rebecca Gonzalez. You'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Rebecca Gonzalez with the National Association of Social Workers, California chapter. Thank you for this discussion, and actually listening to the other commentators, it gave me a little food for thought. And I think, especially what Jen Alley said about where telehealth services were originating from was something to think about. So I'm only going to comment on the second item, not the first. The second item, which mentions social work. And as the board knows, especially Roseanne, we're always a little scared every time we see them wanting to include social work. Because we do have our, our own accrediting agency. Although upon closer inspection, You know, the wording that you provided does, it could be seen, or the way I'm seeing it, it's clarifying what's already happening, that they may provide these services. And it does have the important distinction of saying that they're still under the jurisdiction of their school. And also the fact that this is only in regulation and we're not talking about statute, I think gives me enough comfort for saying that we're okay with this suggestion. And then, but I do think it is, you know, interesting to take the other comments under advisement and figure out if there needs to be further clarification of those telehealth services. And, you know, also, you know, would welcome any comments from Roseanne if she sees it the way that I'm describing it, which is that it is definitely not bringing, you know, dictating social work education in any
15
manner.
seconds.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual who's requested public comment, Miranda Fury. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device. One moment while there you are in my attendee list. All right, now you are unmuted.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm Miranda Fury, LCSW, and I'm really appreciating the discussion, as always, all of the thoughtful comments. This is a really big topic, and I would love to, I kind of, when I was thinking about what I wanted to weigh in, there's so much here. So I'm just going to pick out the part that that I feel is a little different than what other commenters may be mentioning, which is client accessibility. So I know we're talking about training trainees and having it in the office as well as on telehealth, but I just want to put out there that not all clients have the technology to do video. Not all clients have the ability to be in person. And also, I'm going to disagree, although I love Diana's comments, I'm going to disagree a little bit that I have personally had clients that were very shy of video, and we started on phone. And then as they got to know me, they became more comfortable and were able to transfer to video. So sometimes client comfort level, can have there can be very, clinical reasons why clients are uncomfortable in video to start. So I just wanted to put out there. And then lastly, I did want to say, I know we're not exactly talking about texting, but I did want to re-emphasize my concerns from the last meeting, that texting is a potential confidentiality breach. We really don't know who's on the other line. It could be the batterer of the victim that we're treating, who's texting to us. And there could be, it really opens the door for a lot of very
15 seconds.
Thank you. Okay, so that's it. I'll just say thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to comment.
All right, this is the moderator. I did have another hand raised from Delene Forrester, but it looks like they lowered it. Delene, if you, okay. Let me go ahead and request to unmute your microphone now. You'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning.
My name is Delene Forster, a licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed professional clinical counselor, and clinical supervisor. And really, I raised my hand because several people had made points that I was focusing on, and particularly Ben's recommendation for what is face-to-face and making sure that it's seeing people. The piece that I wanted to also point out is that it is true that not every client has the technology in order to be able to be seen for therapy, and that there is great value in telephone therapy as well. And so I just want to make those points and definitely support that. I too was one of those people who thought that there's no way that you could get as much done in therapy virtually as you could in person, and have been proven wrong multiple times. And so I think that it is looking forward to how therapy is changing. And certainly the younger the generation, the much more comfortable they are with all forms of technology. But I definitely agree with texting is a real concern and wouldn't be what I would consider face-to-face for anything. And I do think that at least with a telephone call, you can hear your client's voice or your, I think for supervision is important to see your supervisee during that face-to-face. I'm okay with that requirement, but with clients, I think that there's a definite value for hearing their voice. So that's it. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears we have no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you so much, moderator. And I would like to thank all of our public commenters. We really appreciate your input and your perspective. And I've said this before, as we are trying to navigate this new frontier, it really is great to hear everybody's perspective to give us some direction and as we move forward with the purpose of consumer protection, but also as we look at how to support our both our trainees and our associates and licensees. So really do truly appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. Okay, so Diane, go ahead.
Yep, sorry, I know we want to move on, but a few things. So somebody had mentioned that using telehealth and a trainee working from home would be like a private practice. That's an interesting thought. Not at first I thought, oh yeah, kind of. But then I reflected back to my very first practicum experience where I was in a school-based program. My supervisor was not with me at the school site. I had the principal and the school nurse and the secretary, but my supervisor was a few cities away, and this was before cell phones, so I didn't even have a phone where I could reach out and call my supervisor immediately when my first client was suicidal. At least working from home today, our students, our trainees, our associates have all that technology around them that they can pick up a phone. If I'm on video with you, I can still pick up a phone and start dialing or texting my supervisor to say, help, 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 please jump on Zoom with me. So I think there's that immediate response still available. So I'd kind of want to throw that out. And then the other thing with video versus phone, and I still put phone kind of with text messaging, but with video, I know that the BBS does not require KCREP accreditation, but when we're looking at LPCCs, more and more universities are following KCREP guidelines. And one of the guidelines is that students have to be either watched live during session or they have to record their session so that those sessions could then be watched and we can see body language and everything that the client is presenting that we wouldn't have if it was only audio recorded. That's not one of the allowances. So I still think there's so much value in while somebody is training. It's different if you're a licensed clinician and you want to do phone therapy, but in training, when they really need to be guided and supervised, there's something about that face-to-face. And then the one last thing is the thought at text messaging is a lesser option. It's not ideal. I will just throw out that if we look at the younger generation, they don't talk on the phone. They rarely pick up their phone and use their voice to talk with their friends and to socialize. They're text messaging back and forth, and they text quicker than we probably talk. And so I not that I'm saying that we need to allow this, but if we're saying phone is okay, then we might want to consider text messaging because that's the generation that communicates via text. And you're not going to hear anything in their voice because they're not going to share anything through sound. They're going to share their voice through text, if that makes sense. So thanks, Chris.
Sorry, thank you, Diane. All right, so I might need a little direction here, Roseanne and or Steve, about what next steps might be, because I don't know that we have enough to move forward with a motion, or do we? Roseanne, you're muted.
Thanks. Sorry. I just want to add on to what Diana said about about the phone, while it is valuable, I think we're talking about trainees here, and trainees, so there's a public protection element that the board's responsible for ensuring that they get a quality education to treat all types. So we're not talking about eliminating the ability of a licensee or an associate even to those individuals can all still do services with clients via any type of telehealth that they want, as long as their supervisor will allow it. So we're really talking about trainees and the ability for them to really learn and have the best experience with their clients possible. So it's sounding like the video conferencing, and we do this with supervision already, is that the video conferencing is probably the most important for trainees, either face-to-face or video conferencing. Kind of combining and being mindful of what a couple of people said in terms of the concern that, yeah, gosh, these are trainees, like they really should have both in person and video, not all, but not wanting to prescribe numbers. I kind of like Ben's suggestion that that we use the face-to-face as in person or via two-way real-time, a combination of the two. We don't necessarily maybe specify how much. We can leave that up to the supervisor, but they can be a combination. If somebody wants to meet in person, they have to do some of that. They have to do some of the video, because that's where the future is going. So we would just allowing a combination would allow them to have the training on both, and they can figure out how much, based on individual needs. So I would suggest considering that, and then not making any changes to 1815.5, but strongly advising in LPCC and LMFT law. We can't really do anything in social work law. We don't call out practicum, and those schools already have their standards. But advising that in those two sections where we define face-to-face, that they follow the regs for standards of practice for telehealth. So that's what I'm suggesting at this point. So we can talk about how you feel about that.
You have a thought? I'm comfortable with that, Roseanne. I think that what we're learning through this process is that not every model is going to fit everybody, and so by allowing some room for people to kind of make decisions, as long as we kind of keep the fence around the playground, and then let everybody inside that playground kind of run things how they want to run them, then I think that we're allowing more opportunity for both quality training, and still focusing on consumer protection. At least that's my impression from what I'm hearing.
And when it comes to the trainees, it's really about providing enough guidance to the educators so that they know what's allowed. Because again, when it comes to our trainees, the educators are the ones that decide where they're allowed to work or not. Just because an agency might meet the requirements that the board, put out, that doesn't mean that the university will automatically send students there. That the university may decide that's not a great training opportunity. That might be a great placement for associates, but they're not going to get the hands-on training they need or the guidance they need. And so I think as long as we provide enough clarification at that level, I think that's what's really important.
Okay. So then at this point, Roseanne, I think we're ready for a motion, or no?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, we can do a motion. So the motion that I'm thinking would be to draft language in LMFT and LPCC statute to define face-to-face as being a combination of face-to-face is a combination of in-person or via real-time two-way video conferencing. And that somehow put some language in there that it is the board advises that the board's telehealth regulations be followed.
Sounds good to me. Can I make that motion? I make the motion for exactly what Roseanne said.
All right, and I will second that motion. Discussion? Public comment, yes? Is that where, make sure I get it right. All right, moderator, will you open the Q&A for public comment?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this motion, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. All right, looks like we have a request from Jennifer Alley. Jennifer, I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Good afternoon, or almost afternoon. This is Jennifer Alley with Camped again. I appreciate the thoughtful discussion. I do have a little bit of pause with the motion because I do feel like the safety net on in-person requirements is kind of going away, even though it'll be up to the jurisdiction of the school. I would want to consider possibly a sunset on this so we can reevaluate in a few years to see how it's going. That is an action and direction that we took on another issue. And so we have some reservations and some concerns. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears that was our only request for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Jennifer, that was for that comment. Okay, what do we, it's a fair point. What do we think about, a sunset piece on this, just to make sure that we're not, I feel like we're in such murky water that putting safety nets in place isn't a bad idea. Diana?
No, I agree. It's funny because I guess in my head, I always think, well, we just do it and then we reassess. But I guess, and still, I feel like I'm still new to this process, but maybe that's what's required so that we can reassess down the road. We've kind of gotten through these last 2 years with these little, let's put this waiver in and then we'll see how it's going and we'll ask for the waiver to be extended and we'll see how it's going. And, and if things aren't working, we pull them back. And so I guess I don't quite know how that works, and Roseanne, maybe you can clarify for me, but if we add something that it's time limited so that we could reassess.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that Jen brings up. I think it's definitely appropriate. We could definitely do a sunset date on it. I wouldn't go as far as coming up with a date just yet, because we're just in the discussion. So I would think maybe more like when it gets to the board, we would come up with a sunset date, maybe, assuming that this was legislation for the following. I mean, we're kind of getting way out into the weeds. So I think we maybe put a placeholder for a sunset in, and then as this becomes closer to reality of running it as a bill, we assess at the very end when the board approves the language, what the sunset date should be. But I think that a placeholder for a sunset date is a great idea.
Do we need to amend the motion for that, or can that go into just go into the notes?
I think we're good.
I think we need to amend the motion to add a placeholder for the sunset date.
That's correct. This is Sabina. That would be the best practice. And then you'll see this again probably too many times, more than you might prefer, but it'll definitely come back plenty of times and you'll have more opportunities to make other adjustments.
Okay, so do we need to restate it all again, Roseanne, or can I just say that my motion is for what you said with the addition of a placeholder for the sunset date?
For purposes of my minutes, I would like for you to restate the motion, if you don't mind.
Okay, so the motion would be to require, redefine face-to-face in the LMFT and LPCC laws for trainees and for LMFT and LPCC trainees. So draft to define face-to-face as in-person or via two-way real-time video conferencing, a combination of these. And to also include language that the board advises that its telehealth regulations be followed. And then for all of this, to add a placeholder for the sunset date to be determined at a later date when it gets closer to board approval.
Yes, I make that motion.
And I will second that motion. Any discussion? Public discussion? Moderator, would you open the Q&A for public discussion?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this motion, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, looks like we have a request from Jennifer Alley. Jennifer, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. I'll request to unmute your microphone now.
I would just like to, this is Jennifer Alley with CAMPT again. I would just like to thank the board for adding the committee for adding the sunset to amending the motion to have the sunset in it, and look forward to continuing the discussion. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. It appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. All right, Christina, I think it is time to call roll for the vote.
Okay, Chris Jones,
Yes.
Diana Hurwitz,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right, thank you. So next on the agenda is suggestions for future agenda items. This is the chance for us to suggest topics to be included in the future board meeting discussions. Diana, do you have any additional agenda items for future board meetings at this point? I think you're muted.
I know, sorry, I couldn't, my mouse wouldn't move. The only thing is what I brought up earlier, I guess, is just for us to look at what telehealth looks like crossing state borders. You know, out-of-state students who want to provide services via telehealth in California with a licensed California supervisor, or California students who want to provide services out of state, following California laws, but with another supervisor who's licensed in that state, I guess.
I think that's great.
That's it.
Okay. Do we want to? How about your earlier point where we were talking about number of hours? I don't know if this is a time to discuss that. I can't remember exactly what it was that you had brought up.
I just brought up the idea of, do we need to limit the number of hours in any way? But I think that that's already on the plan for discussion later.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay. And I don't have anything. I think we have plenty to discuss. I don't know that we need any. I don't have any additional agenda items to add. Moderator, would you open the comment for public for future agenda items for us?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. Or if you're an audio-only participant, you can click *3 on your device to raise your hand. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, and then next on our agenda is public comment for items not on the agenda. This is a reminder that the board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during the public comment section, except to decide whether to place that matter on the agenda of a future meeting. So moderator, would you open up for public comment?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. All right, it looks like we do have a request from Michelle Crawford Morrison. Michelle, a request to unmute your microphone now.
Hi, this is Michelle again. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear
Okay.
you.
Thank you. My audio has had problems, and I failed to introduce myself with my audio problems last time. I'm an LMFT and an LPCC, and I do supervise, as I mentioned earlier. I was going to comment a few minutes ago when Diana was talking about how to navigate the trainees who are out of state, and I would like to see that as a topic that is discussed further in both directions, as she mentioned. Having students who are in school wanting to get licensed in California, would they be allowed to see clients even though they're physically in another state? If their university and clients and supervisors are in California, and then vice versa. Can students who are in California but want to get licensed in another state find a way to get their hours and still meet the licensing or the educational requirements for California? That's it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, this is the moderator. It appears we have no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you so much. All right. So our next agenda item is adjournment. Thank you. Thank everybody for participating today. This, again, was a very thoughtful discussion, and I really, truly appreciate everybody's time and effort that they're putting in to help us move forward with this committee. As a reminder, our next board meeting will be on May 5th and 6th. We hope to see you then. This meeting is adjourned. The time is 10:22 a.m. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, Chris. You too.
Thank you, everyone.